Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show. Let's continue our conversation on design and inclusion. Maybe you've been feeling a bit of Olympic fever. Of course, Canada picked up a few more medals in the last few hours, including Damien Warner winning gold in the decathlon just a couple of minutes ago. Now, even though I was a bit skeptical headed into these games, I've been caught up in the hype over the weekend and the last few days. And with an Olympics comes new stadiums and facility builds, which is an opportunity to meet and exceed new accessibility standards. Marco Pasqua is an accessibility consultant, and he joins us now to take a closer look at this issue. Hey, good morning, Marco. Great to chat with you once again.
Good morning, Dave. It's a pleasure as always.
It's always a pleasure. So, Marco, we don't have to look as far as Tokyo to see how accessibility standards can apply to a new sporting venue. In fact, we can find a middle ground between you in Vancouver and I in Toronto in Regina, Saskatchewan, where Mosaic Field incorporates a whole host of inclusive elements. What are some of the things that have been built into that stadium?
Yeah, absolutely. So that stadium is actually a gold-rated facility through the Rick Hansen Accessibility Certification Program. I'll name a few here. I've written them down just so that I didn't miss anything. Paratransit is given priority access on game days and for major events. There's Braille, obviously, throughout on the signage throughout the facility. The concourse has a wide area for easier navigation. Tactile wayfinding strips are located throughout all the entryways. What else can we say here? 400 assisted listening devices are available throughout the facility. There's 157 accessible spaces for seating, including 114 companion seating options, 9 accessible single-stall restrooms, and 9 voice-equipped elevators, including 40 power-assisted doors throughout the facility. So it's a lot to digest there, but that's just an example of what you can do to create a gold-rated facility.
Yeah, I love that you run down the list there, and I know that AMI this week did a couple stories about Mosaic as well when that stadium was first opening up through our Edmonton bureau, which was super cool. But Marco, you know what I love about that list? Some of that is built environment, and some of that is thinking about the social elements, right? Giving paratransit extra access and better access, priority access on game day. That's a little thing, but that's a big thing at the same time.
You know, it goes a long way, Dave. You're right. You know, it's not just one size fits all or one element fits all. And when you plan in advance for these kinds of features, I think the city and the people who participate, they recognize that.
Now, Marco, it wasn't that long ago that Canada hosted an Olympics of our own. The Athletes' Village was retrofitted into housing in Vancouver after the Games. How did some planning allow builders to ensure that some of this new housing ended up being accessible?
So, I mean, you have this incredible facility located in False Creek in downtown Vancouver. So what do you do with this space? You know, there's an accessible housing crisis throughout Canada. And I think that for them to recognize we can convert some of these spaces and suites into accessible suites was a huge win. It's close to transit. They needed to make sure that there was enough space for power wheelchairs, for example, to be able to fully rotate throughout that space, as well as installing things like tracks so that somebody who has a lift in and out of a bed could easily use it. And of course, power assisted doors, and then making sure that those co-op facilities at a price point that makes sense for all people. So again, just making sure that there's enough space there, that you're pre-planning and that you're thoughtful throughout that planning process.
So that leads me to a question here, because when we talked about Mosaic Stadium, that was really about the spectator experience. When we think about the Athletes' Village, that was about a Paralympian experience. So I'm curious, how has the Paralympic movement impacted facilities for athletes and spectators alike?
Well, you know, I think there's been a real push over the last few years to recognize that parasport athletes are on the exact same level as those Olympic athletes. So ensuring that they have the spaces when they enter the change rooms, you know, to feel dignified, to feel like they can, you know, change with that dignity, to be able to have areas where they can put their equipment and be able to tuck it underneath. I know that in Surrey, for example, we have extra deep benches that you can tuck in big equipment so that if you're in a wheelchair or you're, say, a wheelchair basketball athlete, you're not tripping over your own equipment. And that thoughtful planning goes a long, long way.
So, Marco, you made reference to it there. Obviously, the experience you share with us once a month is super valuable, but you share your experience with a whole bunch of people and clients across the board. So you've been doing some work in Surrey, British Columbia. What are some of the athletic facilities that you're offering some guidance on? And what is some of the key advice you're giving on how to make these spaces a go-to destination destination for elite parasport competition?
Oh man, that's such a great question. Well, first and foremost, I have to mention this. The city of Surrey is the municipality with the highest participation in the RHF AC program, that Rick Hansen program, with 5 gold-rated facilities, including 1 pending, and 23 certified facilities. We actually have the first arena and the first aquatics facility to receive gold in Canada. So a couple of those facilities to mention would be Grandview Heights Aquatic Center with an accessible lift into the lap pool, accessible change rooms, and an adult change table, which I think is really interesting. North Surrey Sport and Ice Complex is the first parasport-ready facility with plexiglass boards at the player bench area. So what that means is that if you're a para-sledge athlete, that you can actually see the action of what's going on in the game because it's translucent. Yeah, exactly.
That's super smart.
It's ready and you don't have to change out those boards every single time a para athlete is there, as well as the ice is actually flush at that level so that when you're entering with your sledge, you're not tripping up over thresholds that are a little bit too high. And currently I'm helping the city with planning on their Bear Creek Athletics Center that's going to have an accessible grandstand and a number of different accessible features. So I think that it's really cool that cities like the city of Surrey, they recognize that in order to attract those athletes with disabilities into your city, you do have to plan with those athletes in mind. And that also, ties in the spectators and the rest of the community members as well.
Yeah, these para events do come with some cash money attached to it. We saw obviously before the pandemic really took hold, ticket sales for the Paralympic Games in Tokyo were through the roof. So there can be a lot of positive investment here and a lot of return on investment for cities to do this, which then leads me into my last question. A bit of chatter here, Marco. It's not strictly an accessibility question, but it certainly applies. Hosting an Olympics can be costly and does come with some controversy for host cities, see Rio and Sochi. I've often talked on air about investment in public transit that went hand in hand with the Montreal Games in the 70s and the Vancouver Games about a decade ago. How important is it that a city understands in these large-scale projects that an accessible and inclusive lens is applied to pretty much every dollar spent? I know that's a leading question, probably self-evident, but I think it's worth batting around a bit.
Oh, no, 100%. And, here's some stats from an HCMA study that was done. They did a feasibility study on building to RHFAC gold standard, which goes above and beyond building code. And they found that when planned in advance, when looking at the blueprint phases of building these facilities, the raise in cost is only about 1% for most facilities and about 0.5% for office spaces. So that goes to show you that you're going to save tens of thousands of dollars when you're planning in mind, when you have an accessibility consultant that can kind of help you to navigate those things in advance. And to your point about host cities, we know that gentrification is a major issue when things are swept under the rug for certain areas and certain communities. And I think that to plan more inclusively shows that you're thinking about those communities, shows that you're not saying that this is an afterthought, that those individuals and those communities are welcome to participate, and that it's not something that you're just creating as a facade by people and knowing that camera crews are going to be on your city and you better look your best. I think that to plan inclusively is going to be the hot trend of the future. And I don't just say that from just a trend standpoint for, 2022, and then that's it. I really think that this subject matter is actually going to be one that is now in the highlight for many, many cities because of the benefits and knock-on benefits of universal design and planning for people, not just now, but in the future as well.
Marco, that's well put, well said. Thank you so much for making time for us this week, shifting your time slot a little bit for us. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.
Looking forward to it.
That's Marco Pasqua. He's an accessibility consultant who joined us from Vancouver, British Columbia. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.